All right, so welcome back. This is FIVARS 2024, and we love doing this creator series where we get to find out who is behind these pieces, why they exist, and how they were made. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Koryn Wicks, who brings us an augmented reality piece that is location specific. And I think we first heard about this almost a year ago. I'm not sure if it has evolved much since then. We'll find out. And it's going to manifest as part of this FIVARS at the old Los Angeles Zoo, which is a favorite for insiders who know that this crazy place still has the concrete cages where they used to keep all the animals before they made it into the big, beautiful zoo where I now have a membership. So we're just before Halloween, and it's a ghosty experience, and it all works out just right. So welcome, Koryn.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we describe it first? What is it called?
Sure.
What does it do? How does it feel?
So the piece is called Ghosts in the Machine, the Old Zoo. It is part ghost tour, part mobile game, part walking tour, part AR experience. It is site specific. So you go to the old zoo in Griffith Park. There's a sort of prologue to the piece in which it's described to you that you've found a phone in the grass. You pick it up, you receive a call, and you're talking to our main character, who is a medium who's crossed over to the other side. She does not remember how or why this happened, and the rest of the piece is her taking you on a journey to help her recover her memories and figure out what happened.
What do you have a sort of past that has to do with the esoteric and the mystic, or was something else motivating this idea?
I'm very interested in these things. I wouldn't describe myself as someone with like a background or real personal relationship with any of these things. I've always liked horror. I've always liked the idea of ghosts. I had a Ouija board as a kid. And, just from being interested from so long, I've certainly picked up some knowledge along the way, but it's not something that I feel like I have a strong, position, or I'm not someone who's here to tell you this is what it is.
Right.
I'm just someone who's very interested and curious with the sandbox and wanted to play in it and do a sort of take on it.
And AR is really kind of about ghosts in the machine, isn't it? It's being able to see specters laid over the real world. So it's very conducive to that subject.
Yeah, very much so. It's sort of the perfect medium for, playing with ghosts.
So tell me about what you needed to learn to be able to make this, and what did you not realize you were going to have to learn to be able to make this?
Sure. So this project sort of evolved over 2 iterations. I learned a lot more for the second iteration, and that was because of lessons learned during the first one. So starting with the first iteration, it was very much a sort of traditional ghost tour in the sense that you arrived at a location, you started the app. There was a narrator taking you along this journey, and at different points in the journey, you're prompted to use your phone to uncover spirits. And for that version, we created the animations with motion capture, and I filmed them, but I did not actually do the process the film into motion capture myself. That version also culminated with a dance on film, so an actual film as opposed to AR. That was the first version of the experience. In the second version, there were a few things I wanted to develop. One was the sort of framing of the experience. The whole thing is happening on a mobile device, and it felt really natural to take advantage of that because there's such a part of our lives and the way we communicate. So why not have that interface part of the experience? And so in this version, we really do embrace that frame. So there's moments where you're answering calls from characters
Oh,
or
cool.
texting characters. You're using a map that is very much like a Google map, like we're all used to using.
It's a
So we
fake
really
Google map,
embrace
or is it
that.
the real Google map?
It is basically it is Google Map, but it looks different because we're using a sort of Google Map plugin
Cool.
to use it in our experience. And also for this second version, I both filmed and edited the motion capture myself.
Mm.
And so that was a massive undertaking for me. I had to learn Blender, I had to learn Unity, and that was a really, really interesting process, and a very, very challenging process. So I think that answers your question, I
Yeah,
hope.
yeah. I actually teach Blender
Mm,
because I'm not a Blender expert, but because I had gotten so many cool little tips that filled in the gaps that normal tutorials might not touch upon. And I started to take my fellow students in an immersive design class being taught by Jackie Mori. I said, how about we meet this Saturday and I'll tell you some really weird stuff I learned about Blender. And then they said, oh, you should just teach it because it helps to get out of tutorial hell. And so Blender is a tool that I feel like everybody should know in the modern world, as we move into a progressively spatial media that we'll have to express ourselves in. And getting an understanding of how things move in Cartesian space and how to optimize assets that we can share with each other and take all of these cool new features that our phones are going to have to capture things in volume and make them distributable. It's kind of like learning Microsoft Word in 1999. So I think it's an important skill set that you bashed your way through to be able to, and I think also when you have, the problem is that when people try to learn something like Blender, it's like learning math. It's like, why do I need to learn all this? So when you do have a specific creative outlet for it, it will really become incidental to that. It's sort of more like goal oriented, and then you really do learn in the process. So I just wanted to parenthetically say that Blender is free open source 3D modeling software, and it looks like an airplane cockpit at first, but little by little you learn the things you need to learn. And so I find that exciting. And so then you took your stuff out of Blender, which you had cleaned up, and you brought them into Unity or some other platform?
Yeah, we brought it into Unity. So, and I say we a lot because I collaborated with a app designer who built the sort of interface and a lot of the functionality of the app, and was working in Unity on that. And so then I imported my animations into Unity, and a lot of the effects are also happening, or pretty much all the effects are happening in Unity as well.
Some people call AR the thing where you put up a picture in front of your pass-through phone. But other people know that AR is really more about fitting an object in space and being able to walk around it and move around that object, and it holds its position. So which of the versions of AR are we talking about here?
It is the latter version. So we're using a combination of geolocating the various ghost spirits that you're interacting with. We're using a combination of geolocating them, and then once you get to that general area, we've used Niantic's Wayfarer software
Wow,
to
cool.
actually create 3D meshes of those locations in the back end of the app. So you don't see this when you're using the app. You're looking through your camera, you're seeing the world in your phone like you would if you were taking a picture.
Mm-hmm.
But the app is referencing that image to this 3D model we have in the back end, recognizing it, and then saying, okay, I know based on this location that the animation goes here specifically right next to this tree.
Cool. It's quite a stack. So for folks who don't know, Niantic was the folks who famously did the Pokemon Go stuff and a bunch of other really, really cool experiments. I think Amy, our co-producer, was really into one of their Tamagotchi pet raising things that they did. But it's a very, very powerful framework to rely on. So that gives us a better sense of how deep down the rabbit hole you've gone with this. And do you think that people will be scared by it, or is it more of a whimsical approach to the subject?
It's definitely more of a whimsical approach to the subject. It is not scary. It is dealing with themes of loss and death. So I would definitely say like viewer discretion is advised in the sense that it is dealing with adult themes, but it is not there to scare you.
It's like a portable Disney haunted house ride, or well, that's definitely for kids, but even that was terrifying when I was a kid.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's this is a very like local reference, but I would say the tone is somewhat similar to The Nest in LA, which is like an escape room immersive experience.
Oh, cool. Interesting. Yeah. So do you think that this is like a one-off artistic installation for you, or are you going to continue to work in the XR medium after this?
I hope not. We are submitting it to some other festivals, so we're waiting to hear back about that. We did design this experience in such a way that it is designed to be remounted. So you can take this experience and put it in other locations. You know, you need a little bit of lead time to scan your locations and replace the animations accordingly.
That's cool.
But it is very much adaptable, and the audio, the story that is happening has some references to Griffith Park, but we very intentionally isolated those in the script, so they're very easily removed or replaced to adapt to other locations.
I like that modular approach, that customizable thing, that it's not all super hard coded. Very useful. So is this like a world premiere that you're doing here at FIVARS, or has it shown before?
This is a world premiere. This is the first go of this.
We get that a lot. We get that a lot, and it's not a flex so much as it is that it's really amazing to be able to see works sort of emerge for the first time and give it a proving ground in a way. And we love to have a relationship with creators where we do go back and forth and we say, well, this is what we found out. And creators are really wonderfully open sometimes to taking that feedback and input and improving their works before they can move off onto the big worlds of the festival circuit. And I always find that really exciting to have that. I think it's important to test and show and listen to what happens when you do it, and know that these things are not always completely 100% baked, that you can still kind of fudge things around a bit.
And especially when you're working in the world of technology, because you can finish something, and I have just recently had this experience where like this experience is built. It's and then the iPhone 16 came out.
Right.
And there's a new little bug that we have to contend with. So just echoing what you were saying, like, yeah.
Yeah, unlike cinema where you say, oh, movie projectors are going to be movie projectors. This festival is hosted in WebXR, and just a Chrome patch can break the entire thing. So that's an interesting part about working in this kind of technology, is that you're dealing with controllers and phones and iOS and versus Android, APIs and Unity version changes. So you have to become a kind of tech expert by proxy of getting to that experience. I know this was originally made for a location in Pasadena, is that right?
Yeah, actually in Altadena, which is right next to Pasadena. But there's a really incredible hiking trail there called the Cobb Estate Trail. And like the old zoo in Griffith Park, it has this sort of haunted history that really works well with the idea behind Ghosts of the Machine. So the first version was set there, and we did scout that location, and we did test for reception on the major carriers and on iPhone and Android, and we were like, great. And then we got to play testing, and suddenly we were losing reception on certain days, depending on the weather. It's right at the foot of the San Gabriel Mountains, just to give some context there. And we ended up actually having to do some really clever workarounds where instead of using geolocation for that experience, we were using cached data to approximate distance traveled between waypoints. And then once people had sort of reached an approximate position of a waypoint, we had a sort of like wayfinder image that was like partially opaque that you would line up with what, you know, you could see through your camera. And then the, you know, AR would happen. And, you know, we were able to get that working, and it was a great sort of workaround. But I'm very happy to be working at a location with reliable signal.
And please look where you're walking. Don't walk off a cliff.
Yes.
But, you know, it was really evocative for me to think about that, like, because, well, first of all, when Pokemon Go happened, it was before the pandemic, and it was like the last great sort of event before the pandemic that affected everybody, because small mom and pop shops were dropping these lures, and all of a sudden there was 100 people walking around staring at their phones, meeting each other, going to parks at 1 a.m. and finding like 100 people there. It was really an incredible effect. And it brought you to weird neighborhoods. It brought you to real in the world places. You would see like night critters walking around the streets, skunks and coyotes and all these things that you may not see. And this is the same, where it's like, wow, I am in the middle of a haunted canyon in Altadena for some strange reason. And I think it's not insignificant to point out how AR can physically move you to places, whereas VR is the opposite. VR, you get to stay in your basement and travel the world. So there have to be, of course, safety concerns and disclaimers. Do you put any kind of guardrails in your experience to help with that, or to caution folks?
There are parts of the experience where you are traveling from waypoint to waypoint. And during those parts of the experience, anything narrative that's happening is very audio based, so that you are not sort of compelled to look at your screen. Whereas when there is AR animation happening, I wouldn't say it's fully stationary, because there's certainly things you can do in terms of shifting your perspective, or something might happen behind you and you have to go look over there. But you are not traversing great distances at risk of tripping over someone. And then another one of the guidelines we give at the sort of top of the experience is that, you know, we've staged this in a public park, and to also consider that it's a public space. You know, be considerate. The experience is built so that it does require headphones, because I'm one of those people who like can't stand it when people are playing things off their phone speaker. We also have built in the ability to skip locations, because as I've been playtesting, there has been situations where I need to scan a waypoint and someone's filming a video there, and you know, there's a lot of things where it's like, oh, someone's sitting at that bench, I can still do it, but sometimes I don't necessarily want to interrupt, so I can skip and go on to the next one.
Yeah, and that highlights that it's really a UX thing that you're building more than anything. Like, what is the user experience? How quickly can you download and install this? How easy is it to use? Is it safe to go where you're going to go? What happens if there's no reception? What about other people? Does it have like a 911 button built into it? But you learn from iterating upon this. Unlike the Fire Festival, where you're just like, let's just build it and see what happens. You want to be able to, especially with AR experiences that are location specific, folks want to keep that kind of stuff in mind for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
What is going to happen with this? Like, I always ask myself, where do you go from here with it? Do you release it for free on the store? Is there a call to action that makes people donate to you? Do they buy new modules? Like, how do you want that to work?
So that's a great question. I don't have all of those answers right now. After the FIVARS Festival and the pop-up event we're doing in LA, which is next Sunday.
And you have good signups, I heard.
We have good signups. We've got a lot of folks coming. I think we're at like over 20 now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. But yeah, we sort of have to sort of put it in our pocket for a little bit, because a couple of festivals we've applied to, a sort of like condition for submission is that it has not been publicly released yet. And so we'll be sitting on it until we hear back about those festivals, and then take it from there.
Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, we tend to be the opposite of boardroom design, where it's like, how do you get to 10 billion people and then reverse engineer to the present? And I mean that in the most kind way, because you can design things to work at scale, which will appeal ideally to many people, and maybe mean very little to most. Or you do these passion projects that are driven by curiosity and experimentation and discovery and iteration, and create, as the result, a flag post that others will be able to look to and say, oh, you know what was really interesting was when they tried this, and this totally unthought of, unprecedented, weird idea revealed something. And I do feel like that is the purpose of the FIVARS Festival. Like, after running this for 10 years, it's really not, is it good so much as is it trying something that we can all learn from. And we've had pieces about ghosts and AR. In fact, in 2017, we had a theater piece that took the entire city. So you would go to different locations to see the next scene of the play, and they would come out of the ground. What would you say is unique about this experience? It's hard to sort of claim uniqueness, but what would you say is like a special feature of it, or a flavor of it that we haven't seen before?
Well, one thing I'm very proud of about this experience is that everything from the fact that you are experiencing it on a phone, to the location you are in, to the story, they were all considered when we were building this version of the experience. So it feels very much like a holistic experience. It's very story driven. You are using a phone in a way that makes sense to use a phone.
Yeah.
There are these sort of like mobile game elements that are very intuitive, and it just
talk
we
about
really
that a
tried.
little bit. What's the gamey part?
So the gamey part is there's a sort of antagonist character who may not be quite what they seem to be.
Okay.
And users are interacting with that character in a sort of Pokemon Go-esque kind of way. And so that's the sort of game element. And all of these things, I think, have come together in a very holistic way to do an experience that really makes sense. And as someone who, oftentimes when I'm working with technology, I can really like geek out and get really excited about like, oh, I can make this effect happen. And then like get really, really sort of obsessive about like this cool effect. And then, look up 10 hours later and be like, okay, but like, what does that serve in this story? And in this particular experience, everything that you're doing is really serving the narrative.
Yeah, I think that's, it's sort of a tough question to be asked, but I do think of Indiecade, where I went for a long time, and Indiecade is a festival of indie games, kind of like FIVARS, but for indie games of all kinds. They have the big games, they have the night games, and they are this multimodal mashup of things. You don't quite know what to expect. And you're sort of perfect for that because you have this multimodal thing. It's theater, and it's taking disparate apps and technologies and making them feel like a whole unified experience. And it's not exclusive to a single modality of input. It's really taking advantage of all of those things and gamifying them, kind of like an ARG. And that's really exciting to me, actually. I think that using, you know, the world that, and it's also meeting people where they are, because they don't have to go and build a new finagled thing to be able to do it. It's right in front of them, and you're bringing that to life in new ways. And I think that's really inspiring. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Is there any final thoughts you want to share about either the festival process or delivering an AR experience, or to new creators who don't know what to do?
I think the one thing I'd say to like new creators, especially creators who are interested in diving into the sort of XR, VR, AR space, technology space. You know, my background is in dance and choreography. So I am not coming from a video games, technology, programming background. And it was something that I was always interested in and maybe tinkered with a little bit when I was younger, but it wasn't until I got to grad school and started experimenting with like interactive live video that I really started to dig into multimedia work. And then, you know, during the pandemic is when I came to VR and AR. And I guess all of that to say that like these tools are available to you, and they can be a little intimidating because they are powerful tools, and they are not always like super intuitive right off the bat, but they are available. And there are also like great people out there to collaborate with, even if you want to focus more on the narrative performance aspect of things. The app developer who worked on this with me, Lafia Watson, her company is Bad Chick Studios, and like this project has just made such a wonderful partnership and friendship. And so like I would just say to people, don't be afraid to like dip your toe in or dive in.
Yeah, because there's a lot of folks who have skill sets, but they also need a motivation to express that skill set. There's people who are extremely expensive and they're a service-based thing, and that's fine. But there are other folks who are like, okay, now I've taken, 6 years of Unity courses, and what can I do that is going to set me apart or get me excited? And I also just want to say that you being a dancer is not disconnected from the XR medium, because they are both spatial media, and choreography and architecture are intrinsically about understanding space and how to use it. So that makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point.
All right. Well, I've really enjoyed learning more about the experience. I think it'll make it richer for anybody who gets to try it out. Will folks after the festival circuit be able to install this? Like, are they just installing a standalone app, or is it part of a platform?
Yeah, folks will just be able to install this.
Okay,
Absolutely.
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Koryn, and have a great rest of your FIVARS festival, and have fun at the old LA Zoo.
Thanks. Take care.